Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the meeting of the Planning Committee. First of all, there's a few matters of housekeeping. Audio recordings are made at all meetings, and these recordings are published on the Council's website. Would speakers please use the microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and the use of mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, by visitors is welcomed, but you are requested to use them discreetly, to set them to silent, and not to use voice or camera flash functions. Those using such devices are asked to remain seated during the meeting. We may have a break at 8 o'clock subject to items remaining. There are no planned fire alarm tests, so if the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building by the nearest available exit and go to the assembly area in the car park at the rear of the Town Hall. There are toilets on every floor in the building and an induction loop in this room. I'm the Chairman, Councillor John Manning. On my right is Deputy Chairman, Councillor Jessica Scott-Patel. The rest of the committee are opposite and will introduce themselves, starting on the extreme right with Councillor Sykes.
Councillor Laura Sykes, Stanway Ward.
Councillor Dennis Willets, substituting for Councillor Moore.
Councillor Pauline Hazel, Shrub End Ward.
Peter Chillingworth, Great Tay Ward.
Brian Jarvis, Lexden Ward.
Jackie McLean, Cotford and West Stanway Ward.
Jo Hayes, Castle Ward.
Helen Chora, St Anne's Ward.
Mike Lilly, East London Ward.
Rosalind Scott, Wivenhoe Quay Ward.
Thank you. Planning officers this evening are Vincent Pearce, Eleanor Moss, Richard Collins, Daniel Cameron, Karen Syrett, Simon Cairns, Sarah Pullin and Eddie Bacon. Amanda Gigi is here for procedural matters. To all those present in the room at this meeting, we are a quasi-judicial committee. We make our decisions based on material planning considerations following the laws of the land and policies of the council. If we are reminded to refuse an application, we will use such considerations that will stand up in a court of law. The material planning considerations are listed in the committee's agenda. Item 2 is have your say. Has everyone who wishes to speak registered their name? If not, please do so now.
Chairman, no one else is indicating.
If anyone has a petition that they wish to present to me on any of the items on the agenda this evening, please do so now.
No one's indicating, Chairman.
Item 3 is substitutions. Councillor Willits for Councillor Moore. Item 4, urgent items. There are no urgent items. Item 5 is declaration of interests. Councillor Sykes.
Non-pecuniary in 7172 as chair of the parish plan, and non-pecuniary as I sat in on the vision of Stanway.
Councillor McLean. Can I assume you're leaving the room for that one as a pecuniary? Councillor Scott-Patel.
I would like to declare a non-pecuniary interest for the items 7.1 and 7.2, or not 7.2, 7.1, as I attended the pre-application exhibition. I attended, but I didn't speak and share any opinions or comments at the presentation.
Okay, item 6 is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of July 2015. Is that a proposal, Councillor Chillingworth? Seconded by Councillor Hazel. All those in favour?
That's approved, Chairman.
Okay, item 7, I'm going to go through the applications one at a time. We're going to take 7.1 and 7.2 together, but we will make 2 separate decisions. But rather than have the same discussion twice, we will, because they relate to a very similar site and similar sort of arguments, we're going to take them together. We have Michelle Reynolds speaking against. We have Stephen Clark speaking for, and we have Councillor Fiona McLean as a visiting councillor. 7.3, we have Jonathan Rubin to speak for, but only if anyone speaks against. Does any councillor wish to call that one out? No. 7.4 is for Councillor... 7.4, there is no speakers. So, sorry, Councillor McLean, you're going to have to leave the room for the second part of this. If we can take 7.3, can Mandy Judy confirm which ones we can take en bloc?
Chairman, there being no speakers in respect of 2 items on the agenda. If you wish, you can make a decision to approve the applications in accordance with the recommendations in the report or the amendment sheet in respect of item numbers 7.3 and 7.4.
Could I have a proposal?
Chairman,
Okay,
could we
we
just
can-
wait for Councillor McLean?
Okay, we have a proposal to Councillor Chillingworth, seconded by Councillor Scott. All those in favour?
Chairman, that's unanimous.
Okay, can somebody get Councillor McLean again? Okay, we now do 7.1, 7.2. Vincent Pearce to present.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members of the public. I intend to briskly take us through the reports. I shall start with the application 146486 and then go on to the second application. So by the time I've finished, you will have heard a presentation for both applications. Before I do so, I just need to do a little bit of housekeeping. As well as the reports in the agenda, I do need to refer members to 2 amendment sheets. The first amendment sheet sets out an update on consultation responses and provides detail as to the nature of those responses. It confirms that the Highway Authority has not objected to the second of the proposals. We already had confirmation that it didn't object to the first proposal. I've also set out the longer planning history of the site in response to a request from the applicants to do so. I've also confirmed the nature of the Section 106 being offered by the applicants, Church Manor, so there's no confusion as to the extent of the offer that they're making. I've also set out in that amendment sheet the benefits that have been identified by the applicant's agents arising from the proposal. On the second amendment sheet, I've reported updated comments from the Council's Environmental Control Team and also an update from our own licensing team. In terms of licences, the Council has now issued licences for the proposed pub and the Bella Italia restaurant, and Environmental Control are not raising any objection on adverse impact on residential amenity, as they feel that they can control any possible nuisance through the application of conditions. So on that basis, I am suggesting that my recommendation is amended to omit any reference to reason for refusal related to residential amenity from noise. I also need to refer members to 2 letters that have been sent in by the applicants. One was a long letter addressed to members in which the applicants have described numerous areas where they feel that the report that's before you tonight, or the reports, are not balanced, and they've set out in detailed terms areas where they feel the report hasn't accurately reflected proper balance, and I'm sure we can touch on those as we go through proceedings. I don't intend to rehearse them here and now. And the second letter is a letter also furnished by Church Manor, in which they set out a number of corrections for errors that they included in their longer letter. And just for the sake of transparency and clarity, I would just like to read out the relevant sections. The first is, this is a quote from Stephen Clark of Church Manor. I stated that the Persimmon Homes application was never formally approved by Essex County Council in the form of a formal report. However, I do recognise that in the report to Planning Committee, Essex County Council said that they raised no objection, and I apologised for any confusion. The second point is, I stated that the report commissioned by the Council, entitled Colchester Employment Land Needs Assessment, was not an independent report. I fully accept that the Council's consultant to be a well-known and respected professional firm, and do not question their professionalism. So, just so that it's clear that the applicant has made some amendment to their longer letter. So on the screen at the moment, shown in red, is the first application site on the corner of London Road and the Stanway Western Bypass, the northern leg. And on the right, I've identified what the development consists of. It's 2 restaurant uses and a pub restaurant, so 3 units in total. And I've set out what I think are the main planning issues that we need to grapple with this evening. First one is impact on strategic employment policy and jobs, and this strikes at the fundamental heart of planning in a plan-led system, and we will go into more detail on that. We also need to explore potential impact on the viability and vitality of the town centre, and how this proposal fits in with your policies for the town centre and even the urban district centre at Tollgate. I think we also need to explore some of the more familiar issues in terms of design quality, drainage impact, sustainability, highway impact and amenity. But before we do, I do need to briefly describe the policy context for this proposal. And on that rather lurid drawing, you can see that the application site, which sits at the top of the plan, just to the left of those 2 roundabouts, it is designated as employment zone in your adopted local plan. It also falls within the Stanway growth area, and it is also a strategic employment zone. And they are critically important to a discussion of the merits of this proposal, and we will go into some detail as we go through. I think the next thing that I would like to point out, and it's a very quick reference, as you'll see from the report, there are many policy references, but I would just quickly like to quote directly from your core strategy, selected policy, revised as recently as July 2014, particularly policy CE3, employment zones, and you'll see from that plan that the application site sits within such an allocation. And the policy is very simple, and it starts by saying employment zones will accommodate business developments that are not suited to mixed-use centres, including industry and warehousing. And it refers you to table CE1B. And that's important because table CE1B describes the sort of uses that are acceptable in an employment zone, and they are research and development studios, laboratories, high tech, light industry, general industry, storage and distribution. And you'll recall from my description of the uses that are appropriate in an employment zone are those which are not appropriate in a mixed use centre. And the types of use in your own policies that are acceptable in a mixed-use centre are A3, restaurant and cafe, A4, drinking establishment, and A5, hot food takeaway. So the uses that are being proposed here are considered to be town centre uses appropriate in a mixed-use centre, not in an employment zone such as this. And of all the policies, I just wanted to draw reference at the start to that particular policy. I also want to draw reference to an appeal decision from the 9th of May last year in respect of some units at the Tollgate Business Park, where the issue of impact on employment zone was considered by the inspector. And in that particular case, the inspector was unequivocal in terms of the importance of safeguarding strategic employment land from uses that are not appropriate in such an allocation. And I'm sure we can come back to that particular slide, but it is something I wanted to draw your attention to in terms of the importance of our strategic employment zone policy and how recently that has been tested. The slide on the screen at the moment is deliberately, looks as though it's the wrong way up, but that's just so that you have north at the top of the drawing. And that shows on the left-hand side the recently approved Wyvern Farm development, some 358 residential properties. It also shows the Phase 1A and Phase 1B applications for Stayne Park. Again, that's another view, a closer view, which shows the 6 units being proposed, 3 within Phase 1A and 3 within Phase 1B. And we should be able to, well, I can on this screen, but not on the one. Oh, there we go. So at the moment, you're looking at the proposals for the bottom 3 units. So on that slide, on the corner between London Road and the Western Bypass is a proposed pub. Sitting above that are 2 restaurants. The access to the site is directly off of London Road, but you'll notice between the 2 phases there is also an access from the north directly off of one of the roundabouts on the northern leg of the bypass. The applicants have, and there's another drawing which I'll explain a little later, but in terms of the first phase, Phase 1A, the road on the access road that runs all the way north-south on the left-hand side of the site, it is intended to install alligator teeth flaps so that traffic can enter from London Road and get to the whole of that site, but traffic north of the pub cannot come back out onto London Road. And members who are familiar with some of the issues on London Road with the residents, there was a lot of concern that this may generate more traffic onto London Road. And what the applicants have done is, by that simple technique, is to cut out a lot of the potential traffic movements onto London Road. The alligator teeth would not be installed until access from the north was made available, and what the applicants have said is that if both phases are approved, they would provide the access to the north at an early stage in order to allow that one-way system to operate at the bottom of the site. So in that sense, there is a link between the 2 proposals if we're to achieve a reduction in possible traffic impact on London Road. And as you can see, that drawing actually sets out the users, and the applicants have made it clear that they have the tenants lined up to occupy these units. So we have KFC, which is a drive-through and also a sit-down restaurant, Starbucks, Coast to Coast, Nando's, Bella Italia, and a McMullen's pub on the corner. We now have the usual technical glitch while the projector. Here we go. So that's an exploded view with the pub on the corner and the 2 restaurant buildings. We've deliberately organised that the buildings are on the road frontage in order to hide the car park and present built form to the Western Bypass. It also then means that the buildings are pushed further away from the adjacent residential development in terms of odour and from the cooking process. Within that drawing, you can see on the London Road frontage, there's a cart lodge to hide the parking from London Road. There's a wall, which we've described as crinkle wall, that runs along the frontage through to the pub. There is a safeguarding line on the frontage. Should the Western Bypass ever be required to be widened, there is land safeguarded to widen the bypass. That's why the buildings are set back. This is the bypass view to the first unit, Unit 1, and as you can see that's a contemporary building, and as we move later on into the 3D CGIs you'll see that it isn't as flat as that looked, and the brick element is designed to read as a wall that runs along the frontage of the site, and that's set back in different places to create light and shade and give the impression of an enclosed site. That's the side view of that unit as you cut through from the bypass through into the back of the site, so it has active frontage. Again, that's a view of the same unit viewed from inside the site, where there would be new public realm works in front of that property between the car park and the back of this building. So it also has its active frontage is actually on the back of the property. That's a CGI of the proposed pub restaurant that sits on the corner, and you'll see that's got a traditional character, and that morphs into the more contemporary character, and the common theme is some of the brick detailing that links the two. There is a shot of the traditional and contemporary as you would see them from the bypass. That's a CGI view looking northwards to Unit 1 and Unit 2. And that gap there is the connection, new public realm, through to the back of the site where there is the new public realm to the rear. You can just see the corner of the pub nestling into the left-hand corner of the drawing. Again, that's a shot from inside the car park looking back towards the main frontage of the site. Again, it's got a contemporary twist, not unattractive. Again, that's the London Road view of the cart lodge that helps to conceal the parking, and that's the proposed access to the car park. And this represents the gap between Phase 1A and Phase 1B. So Phase 1A is at the bottom of the drawing, Phase 1B at the top, and that's a new little park that nestles between the two contemporary blocks. And you can start to see some of the public realm being created at the back. This drawing shows the alligator teeth, which is about halfway up on the left, the two red lines. That's where the ability to stop traffic coming back out onto London Road is formed by that neat technique. We do have to look, and the report makes it very clear that the applicants have also offered to carry out more extensive highway works around the roundabout on the corner of the bypass and London Road, and I have to counsel you strongly that you are not able to have any regard to those proposed works because they do not relate directly to this development. And in terms of the CIL test, the Community Infrastructure Levy test set by the government, you are only obliged to have regard to offers that directly relate to the proposal. I think what the developer has tried to do is they are aware of highway concerns in the area and they're offering to remediate some of that as part of their proposal. However, I'll re-emphasise one more time, you have to strike that from your minds for the purpose of considering the merits of this proposal. So I won't dwell on the nature of the problems at that roundabout, other than to re-emphasise that Essex County Council as Highway Authority have quite clearly stated that this proposal will not add significantly to congestion in this area. They are satisfied that those works are not required to facilitate this development. They have no objection to the proposal from a highway point of view. I now move northwards to Phase 1B, and again it continues the contemporary theme in terms of the design. It continues with the public realm to the north, but this highlights the nature of the highway works that are being proposed that create the access from the north, which allows London Road to have the alligator teeth, but it also shows that the developer is willing to provide the connection through to Wyvern Farm to create the bus gate, and the bus gate was something that members wanted to see within the Wyvern Farm development, and the developer here has is willing to provide that vital connection. But it will be a bus gate and not for through traffic, because I know there's concern that it could become a rat run in its own right. So here we have some more CGI of the next phase. So on the right is the southern half, phase 1A, and we're looking on the left at the start of phase 1B, which is coast to coast, the American restaurant. That's how the Starbucks would look. And then there's the KFC with a curved edge as it wraps around the corner. And on the right is the actual access into the whole development from the north. I just need to emphasise here that whilst in the report I've suggested that if members were minded to approve the application itself would have to be referred to the Secretary of State. But having looked at the regulations, the amount of floor space involved here for both applications falls below that threshold. So the Secretary of State has no remit, and we are not required to refer such a decision to the Secretary of State. And I just want to be clear and correct that in the report so that members are under no confusion as to what the position is in terms of referral. In terms of the supporting material provided by the applicants, there is a host of material that we've explored in the report, and they have been available for members to view online. But I just want to draw out, in particular, the employment land report provided by the applicant's agent. And in that, there is a detailed analysis of the policy context for this proposal, the local planning history of the site, the perceived strategic importance of the site as viewed by the developer. Also, the employment impact is looked at, but I have to say the report is silent on the question of how extensively this site has been marketed for the purposes for which it enjoys an allocation, and that is for employment uses in terms of our strategic employment zone allocation. And there is no detail as to the nature of that. So it would appear that we are faced with this proposal before we've exhausted all possible searches for uses that would be appropriate in a strategic employment zone. I just want to make sure that we haven't got anything here. No. So in terms of the report itself, we do not dismiss lightly the question of jobs. And there is no doubt that this proposal does offer, in phase 1, potentially 140 jobs, and overall 242 jobs. And you'll notice from the report, we've gone into some detail as to the nature of those jobs. And what we're saying is that in terms of the two halves of planning, you're here wearing the development management hat of the council, but the council also has a long-term local planning perspective. And tonight you're being asked to try and balance between a short-term offer of a significant number of jobs compared to ensuring that your long-term strategy for job creation in Colchester is brought about. And that's a very difficult judgment, or it could be a very difficult judgment for you to make, because anyone who hasn't got a job potentially might get a job here, and that is a very powerful motive to allow it. However, you are required to have regard to your local plan. It's an up-to-date local plan, and what you're looking to see here is second only in terms of importance to North Colchester in terms of the scoring the land achieves for strategic employment uses. It is ideally located on the A12, and what we're looking for is higher paid jobs that are attracted in the areas where I've already highlighted what your policy is looking for. And also, you'll be familiar with the amount of residential growth that's happened in Stanway, and there's a lot more to come. Within this part of the borough, in the growth area at Stanway, we are looking to create a balanced, sustainable community. And whilst there are some B1 uses within Tollgate, this is a location where we are hoping to achieve, longer term, the sorts of higher paid, higher quality jobs that will create the balance on the west side of town. And it's important in terms of sustainability that we don't necessarily encourage people to travel across and around the borough to get to work if they're living on the west side of town. There is already a high concentration of service sector jobs in Tollgate, and there's no denying that in recent years Colchester has seen a growth in service sector and hospitality jobs. But your long-term employment strategy is to secure a different type of job for the people of Colchester. And there aren't many better sites than this to achieve that. In terms of the layout and design, we're perfectly happy with what's being proposed. So I'm sure as we go through the discussion, and I do have policy colleagues here with me tonight, we will need to drill into what harm arises from this development in terms of its impact on your land use policies. But we also need to have regard to impact on the town centre, because it seems to me what is being proposed here is a restaurant destination in its own right. And whilst the applicants have described this as, in some part, catering to a local need, I think we would all have to accept that its location close to the A12 must be catering for car-borne traffic and customers, particularly in terms of the concentration of the number of restaurants that are being proposed here. In the report, we do not accept that it is complementary to the urban district centre use within Tollgate. The applicants have alluded to the question that it would sit on the edge of an urban district centre and would be complementary. In terms of your policy, that is wholly unacceptable, and the report sets out in some detail as to why that is. But I would like to offer the chance to my policy colleagues perhaps to address you in terms of the strategic importance longer term under the local plan banner, rather than from me as a development management exponent. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Michelle Reynolds, please.
Sorry, Chair. I don't know whether my colleagues did want to.
Okay, you can have up to 6 minutes. Well, 2 lots of 3, so it's 6 minutes. You're the only speaker.
Good evening, my name is Michelle Reynolds and I'm Chair of Colchester Retail and Business Association. I'm here tonight to represent the town centre businesses regarding these 2 particular applications. We would like the Planning Committee to refuse this application tonight for a number of reasons. The first is that this site has been predominantly identified as a strategic employment zone. What they're proposing goes against the policies contained within that strategy. The National Planning Policy Framework document clearly states that protection be afforded to the town centre. Colchester Retail Business Association expects that the council afford that protection on a number of grounds. We feel that this application will reduce footfall and have a negative impact, particularly on the independent sector. This independent sector is hugely attractive to the outside world. It makes Colchester special. It makes us stand out from other towns. It makes us stand out from all the competitive towns, Chelmsford, Ipswich and places like that. By its very nature, the name independence really means that they are primarily owner-run and normally have a few members of staff. We feel that these proposals will make casualties of some of those members of staff and indeed will make casualties of some of the businesses themselves. Colchester Town Centre has already lost 2 independent eateries, a restaurant on North Hill and a long-established family-run business in High Street. Their closures were partly due to reduced footfall, and in these challenging times they were unable to continue. We are fearful that these applications, if granted, will cause the patrons and the customers to drive out to these particular eateries, therefore detracting and taking away the business of the town centre offerings. There is also a car park element attached to this, and no doubt the car parking provision will be free, where if they come into town, mostly they would need to pay to park, and we feel that's an unlevel playing field. The town centre has recently seen significant levels of investment. We've had 3 new eateries in the high street, and we've also had reinvestment by way of 2 really large refits into 2 large chains of eateries, again on the high street. We feel that by granting these applications, it will detract people from coming to the town centre, making it less attractive for the future investment, either by way of attracting new businesses or by the reinvestment in the existing businesses. The applicant states in recent press advertising features that approximately 250 new jobs would be created under these applications. Corba would question how many of these jobs would actually be new. We consider that some of these jobs will be classed as dispersed from the town centre. It also considers that some jobs are more likely to be part-time, lower paid. However, our experience suggests that these job creation predictions are normally grossly overestimated. The net gain in new jobs, therefore, is likely to be lower than the 250 due to the job dispersals and job losses of those businesses who cannot continue to trade in the town centre because of the natural pull from the centre into that these applications would present. Tonight I'm here to ask you to afford that protection to the town centre. I'm here to ask you to help the independent sector particularly to be protected, not to take away the livelihoods of the staff and the people that operate these businesses. If you find that you're unable to make a refusal decision on this application tonight, I would ask you to defer your decision totally, and in a few weeks' time the whole area of Tollgate Village and all the retail aspect will come in line, and I'd ask you to consider these applications in line with that, because that would be the biggest picture and the biggest disaster to the town centre. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stephen Clark, please. It'll be the same rules for you. 2 lots of 3 minutes, total of 6. Bella go after 5.
Thank you. Is that everybody can hear me? Good evening, everybody. My name is Stephen Clark, and I have, for the last 26 years, been involved in commercial development in Colchester. Creating Colchester Business Park, building the Flatwoods headquarters, and various town centre shops, and many other schemes on Seville's industrial estate. I'm very proud of the long association that we have had with Colchester, and also that goes to say that also with Colchester Borough Council, who we've worked with extensively over the years. Sadly, this is the first time in 26 years we've faced a refusal. Our site has had a checkered planning history since 1995 and was identified for employment use in 2006. It has been available since that time. In the 5 years that we've owned the site, we've had no calls or interest. But recently, with all of the publicity, we have had an email from a veterinary practice who would like to establish a veterinary surgery on Seville's Park. He said he needed some retail consent to do that, and we had to inform him that that was beyond the planning that we had for the site. History shows that the planners have over the years been content to allow change of use of employment land in Stanway from employment to leisure use and retail use. For example, in 2008, Frankie and Benny's restaurant. In 2009, Sainsbury's. In 2013, only 2 years ago, Chiquitos and Costa Coffee were all granted consent on land zoned for employment use. The word that has been used is strategic employment land. The Council's consultants state there is still 67 acres of employment land available in Stanway, and I cannot believe that the loss of 4.9 acres net, excluding the access road, can be considered a threat to the Council's long-term employment strategy, especially given that our new access road opposite Sainsbury's also opens up 23 acres of employment land for the future. One of the benefits of our leisure scheme is it provides the necessary finance to support the servicing and accessing of the remainder of the employment land, which will hopefully help it come forward when demand arrives. The character of the area, therefore, has changed beyond all recognition over the last 8 years, and our site, as you can see from the drawing, is now surrounded by housing to the south, housing to the west, a retail, Sainsbury's to the east, and then leisure, such as Costa Coffee and Frankie and Benny's. I therefore would question whether its continued allocation for factories and warehousing, given its proximity to the housing, is actually realistic. The scheme has been subject to widespread consultation over 2 years with the local community, local councillors and residents, and an independent survey found that 84% support from the community for the scheme, with only 2% against. Over the 3 years we've been involved in this project, I think I must have met everyone in Stanway, and I've never had a scheme so well supported by a community as this one. Our design was informed by the Stanway Parish Plan and the Tollgate Vision document, which was published in 2013. This was a 2-year project with the support of the council, where the landowners looked to seek whether they could try and humanise and integrate the various sites within Stanway to provide the types of benefits that that drawing shows. When you look at that drawing and maybe imagine factories and warehouses, it's perhaps easier to see that leisure is the most appropriate use. The attractive design has evolved over 18 months of discussions with the planners, their urban designers, and I'm pleased that the officer's report now shows that design meets with their full approval. Our scheme prevents the isolation of the adjacent 350 homes at Wyvern Farm by providing 2 footpath links between our scheme and Wyvern Farm and the bus link. This is quite important because otherwise, if that was an industrial park, Wyvern Farm would not be integrated into the Stanway community. We're also providing land and financing the cost of widening London Road, and this proposal is supported by Essex County Council. They're very keen to see it happen. Our site has been endorsed by 6 major restaurant occupiers. They've looked around Stanway, they've looked at 67 acres in Stanway and decided that this is the most appropriate location for their business. And I think it's easy to see why. They chose our site above all other sites in Stanway because it provides the best visibility. It's opposite Costa.
Okay, I'm sorry, that's your time up.
I have 6 minutes. All right. Can I?
No, I'm sorry, we have to keep to the 6 minutes.
Okay.
hopefully you got most of what you wanted to say.
Yeah, I bet should have been a bit quicker. Thank you.
Okay, we have Councillor Fiona McLean.
Good evening. I would like to address the two applications for Stane Park. As a councillor for Stanway, I'd like to express my support for these applications. This will be a huge social and economic development for Stanway. The land is in need of development. It has sat for many years with no purpose. With a growing society, we need to, as a council, make use of the wasted land. This development is therefore essential. The key considerations for these applications are the economical effect of Colchester and the effect on the local area and residents. There are many objections for this proposal, mainly around congestion, access from London Road, and deviation from the local plan. Within the report, the Council are proposing that there are more suitable uses for the land, such as instead of developing the land for Class A business, they would rather Class B. I know as a local resident myself that given the choice between the site being occupied by a restaurant, it would be a significantly more favourable option than being populated by a Class B business. While Class B business brings economic growth and employment to the area, this is not necessarily guaranteed instantly. Class A business, however, brings economic growth, employment and social growth within the area. The creation of potentially 140 jobs is also instantly guaranteed. I know from speaking to residents that this is a preferable option if the infrastructure within the area is significantly improved. This the applicant has addressed by only allowing access to one pub from London Road. This is evidence that the applicant is willing to work with highways to improve the local area and traffic situation. What we need to consider is that no matter whether there is Class A or B business, there will be an increase in traffic, and therefore, either way, a further need for focusing on the infrastructure around the area. This is therefore not something the applicant needs to focus on itself. If the committee and council are worried about the site affecting the local town, then they should consider not just one or the other, but how to develop both of the areas. With the demand for housing within Colchester, there is more of a demand for restaurants and leisure facilities. We as a town should focus on building a stronger and more competitive town within Essex, bringing visitors to all areas of town, not just focusing on the centre. From what we have seen in recent years with efforts to alleviate congestion within the town centre, this would be an ideal opportunity to present people with an alternative to travelling to the centre of the town but still bringing economic growth to the area. To comply with planning consistency, I therefore encourage the committee to support these applications, and I urge the committee who don't live within the area to consider the local residents and to hear how they prefer the land to be developed.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Mr. Pearce to respond, and if you'd like to bring in Ms. Syra as well.
I think Ms. Reynolds emphasised the concerns of the independent traders, and we've gone into, in the report, we've explored possible town centre impacts, and Mr. Clark has identified what he sees as the commercial drivers for encouraging this proposal. And I'm not sure we can take that any further until we have fully bottomed out the implications around a loss of strategic employment land. And what Mr. Clark is arguing is that this is a relatively insignificant proportion of a much bigger total, and as such can't cause harm to your overall strategy. But in terms of that strategy, when the land at Stanway was allocated as strategic employment land, the owners of land there at the time suggested that B uses would create 3,500 new jobs. Now, in terms of the area of land here in A3, 4 and 5 uses, it represents 21% of the total area within Stane Park. But 245 jobs only represents 8% of that target level of employment. So somewhere there is an inconsistency between the numbers that were predicted by the landowners when it was originally allocated in 2006 on to 2010 and what we're actually seeing delivered on this site. And again, these are jobs that are not in accordance with your long-term strategy for Colchester. And the planning system must have regard to a longer-term view of how the town will function going forward. And the council is clear that what it wants to do is create sustainable communities where there is a mixture and range of jobs within easy access of residential properties. And there's a real danger here that what we're doing is we're concentrating the job market into a fairly narrow band of service and hospitality related jobs to the exclusion of the type of B uses that actually provide longer term, full-time employment, potentially at higher salaries. And Colchester underperforms when compared to the majority of Essex in terms of the average salary levels. And that's something that your long-term strategy seeks to redress where possible. And it's true, we cannot guarantee that within the next 6 months there will be a B1 user who wants to come here. But as soon as you've lost land with such important locational advantages as easy access to the A12, it becomes harder to attract those sort of jobs to Colchester. There are very few sites in Colchester where you have that easy access to the strategic road network. In terms of some of the references made by Mr. Clark, certainly Sainsbury's was approved on what was employment land, but members who have been on the committee for a while will remember that was a land swap whereby the old Sainsbury's went from retail use and was reallocated for employment use. So generally speaking, it was just a move of location, not a move of land uses. I also want to quickly touch on the Tollgate vision document because Mr. Clark is right. A lot of effort went into producing that document. Originally, it was intended to bind the major landholders in Stanway to a distribution of uses, but that wasn't possible. We couldn't achieve that. But what it became, in its own right, is still important. It became a vision for ensuring that the whole of Stanway was well connected in terms of pedestrian links, cycle links, and that it actually had some sort of heart rather than being a sort of nondescript location. But in terms of uses, the Stanway Vision document doesn't dwell on that, and it doesn't contradict your established, adopted planning policies in terms of employment zone uses, urban district centre and the rest. Councillor McLean has touched on what local people would prefer is this sort of development. From the range of responses you've seen, quoted both in the report and the amendment sheet, I wouldn't have suggested it is as clear-cut as that. There is a mix of views for and against. And what you've got to try and do is balance up the long-term implications of approving this proposal against the shorter-term imperative of creating jobs, any job. This is probably a very useful moment to pass to my local plan colleagues, who perhaps can add some more flesh to the longer-term vision bones of your local plan policy.
Sorry, I can't see you. Ms. Pullen.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to outline some of the key policy issues with the application before us this evening. Stane Park was allocated for employment use in the current local plan as part of the Stanway Strategic Employment Zone through the Site Allocations DPD in 2010, making it a relatively recent allocation. As we've heard this evening, the proposals before the committee consist of 6 restaurant-type units, which are leisure use, meaning the proposal is in direct conflict with both national and local planning policy, as well as the council's up-to-date employment evidence base. I'd like to reinforce the fact that the planning law requires that applications are determined in accordance with the development plan, and the MPPF contains 3 references to this statutory requirement. It's a plan-led system, and our local plan allocates this site for employment purposes. At the heart of the National Planning Policy Framework is a presumption in favour of sustainable development, and paragraph 7 states that the planning system should contribute to building a strong, responsive and competitive economy by ensuring that sufficient land of the right type is available at the right time to support growth and innovation. Our recent employment land study states that it will be important to safeguard the borough's best employment sites, particularly in light of aspirations amongst some landowners for higher non-B-use classes. And it identifies Stone Park as an important component of the borough's employment land supply. It states it's important to retain a portfolio of good quality development opportunities that are likely to prove attractive to prospective firms wanting to move into the borough. And most notably, this includes Stone Park, which benefits from a gateway location on the northern fringes of Stanway Strategic Employment Zone, adjoining junction 26 of the A12, providing scope for the site to create its own identity and profile as a business location. It is vitally important that the planning system safeguards employment land. The proposed leisure development before you is in conflict with the council's locally adopted policies, designed to afford protection to the borough's precious supply of employment land. The retention of the Stone Park site, which is a high-quality employment site for B-use employment, is critical. The availability of this prime piece of employment land helps to ensure that the borough has the ability to meet future inward investment opportunities over the life of the plan to support the housing growth. It is considered that the loss of the site for alternative uses would be detrimental to the long-term sustainable economic growth of the borough, and the site's development for the uses proposed would amount to unsustainable development in direct conflict with both national and local policy. In terms of the site's location, the applicant suggests that the proposed uses are intended to serve the Stanway area and the urban district centre. However, officers do not accept that the proposed development will serve only a local need and the needs of visitors to the urban district centres, and the applicant's arguments to the contrary are unconvincing in our opinion. The Stanway area does not form the relevant catchment. It is clear that the whole town, if not borough and potentially further afield, fall within the catchment of the proposed development. Overall, it's concluded that the proposed development would amount to unsustainable development that contravenes both national policy contained within the National Planning Policy Framework and local policy contained within the local plan adopted by this council. The harm that would result from the proposed development would outweigh any associated benefits, and on this basis, the proposed development is not considered to be appropriate. I'd also like to add that, contrary to what we've heard this evening, there has been serious interest in the site, and that was as recent as 2008-2009. And I would also like to clarify that the site is not allocated for factory and warehousing purposes. It's for wider employment uses, including research and development, studios, laboratories, and business incubation space. Thank you.
Okay, I have 5 councillors to speak. I have 2 ward councillors, with Councillor Scott Battelle, then Councillor Sykes, followed by Councillor McLean, myself and Councillor Hazel.
I would like to make the committee aware that there is an error in the community involvement statement, as it reads, Councillors Scott Boutel asked the applicant about plans for the remainder of the Stayne Park site. The comments were made by former councillor Leslie Scott Boutel, who raised the points in the applicant's report. When I attended the pre-application consultation, it was made clear that I was there only to observe and was not going to comment on it. It also states that no residents attended the pre-application exhibition, so I'm confused how the 84% support is arrived at. I have looked at the CBC website and the comments that have been made, and the feelings of Stanway are split on this. I am in two minds about this application. As ward councillor, I can see the impact it would have on the ward. If this application were to be approved, then it would need a lot of work in order for it to get the balance right and for it to be suitable for the new and old parts of Stanway. The pros of this application: more restaurants, more jobs and training programs, acceptable parking area and travel infrastructure improvements to London Road and parts of the bypass/London Road roundabout. However, that is not directly related to what's in front of us. However, the cons: traffic and highways. I note that highways have not objected to it, even with the proposed improvements. However, the traffic flows will not improve, as there will be more pressure on the A12 at junction 26 and the turn-off from Sainsbury's roundabout and London Road coming from Lexden, even though I just stated the improvements not material consideration. Residents of Lakelands are already reporting an increase in rat runs through their estate when the bypass is busy. This can only impact on residential roads. More restaurants. The restaurants that have signed up, if approval is granted, are chain restaurants that are either new to the area or have an existing base in the town centre. As referenced in the report, paragraph 29, that the Stanway area has an existing number of restaurants. I believe locating another 6 units in the area would lead to Stanway being known as Restaurant Central and would reduce the possibility of other high employment opportunities to Stanway. I note the fear element creeping in about placing factories at this location. However, I am not convinced that manufacturing would want to relocate to this site. I can understand the anticipation of having loads of restaurants on your doorstep. As a resident, I would welcome that. However, it would have a wider impact, not just on the two wards, but on the whole of the borough. As a ward councillor, I know that the borough residents and others from outside the borough would choose to not visit the town centre and visit Stanway instead. This will further impact on Stanway, creating an increase in traffic visiting Stayne Park. As mentioned in the report, this development is meant to serve the whole borough, not just the Stanway catchment area. The majority of the employment that is offered tend not to be high-paying and more likely to be on minimum wage jobs. As a living wage council, we cannot condition that tenants pay the living wage rather than the minimum wage if approved. The area has scored high on the employment lands needs assessment. I would assume that the area could have better job prospects if it remains as categorised in the local plan. It is important to be consistent and to provide what Colchester is lacking, which are high quality job opportunities. Regarding to the impact on the town centre and the local plan, residents' perception is that if restaurants are located outside the town centre, it would not impact on the town centre, which is the core of the borough. However, it is my view is that the town centre is changing and evolving as shopping and leisure patterns change. I note that licensing have concerns regarding this application around the proximity in relation to the current housing and future housing in Stanway. As a borough councillor, I am concerned about the local plan being ignored. If this application is approved, then this would be going against the local plan, which applies to all applications, not just when it suits us. There is an extensive amount of time, work and consultation given to create and gain approval of the local plan. Stanway is allocated as residential and employment. It is an urban growth area. However, adding more restaurants and drinking establishments could lead to the possibility of creating a second town centre. This would have negative impacts on the town centre and would disrupt the balance of such establishments across the borough. This is why it's important to have a local plan to ensure that the balance is there for employment, open spaces, residential and leisure. Design. The design of the application resembles a similar design of a row of restaurants at a large retail park. For an application of this scale, I would have expected something that would be outstanding and distinctive, as it appears to be quite average, that could date really quickly. Where is the wow factor? Car park. The car park from the designs looks like it has the capacity to cope with the amount of visitors coming to and from the site. However, some of the neighbouring restaurants have struggled with car parking capacity, which has led to problems. This is a lesson that applies to this application. If approved, and if the popularity of the restaurants increase, and therefore the amount of visitors will subsequently increase, is the committee fully confident that there are enough available parking spaces? I'm surprised that the developers have limited the amount of car parking spaces at the moment in this time. We do not want neighbouring streets and car parks to become overflow. This could be a sustainable development which could benefit not only the immediate area and the whole borough as a whole, if approved. However, I feel that there are too many weaknesses in this proposal which is not sitting comfortably for me to wholeheartedly support the application. However, if the committee decides to grant approval, I would like to see the following conditions to ensure continuing well-being for my residents. Barriers to be placed and locked at night so that the car parks are not a meeting place once the restaurants have closed. This would assist in residents' fear of crime, as there are already problems that I've been working on with the police regarding speeding on the bypass and the surrounding roads late at night. And condition for additional funding to be provided for cycle lane improvements in Stanway and near to the site. The proposed investments do not go far enough. The highways improvement scheme would need to be reassessed, as the current highways network cannot sustain the level of traffic that it would be expecting. The living wage as opposed to the minimum wage. Can officers confirm that all boundaries will be maintained and we do not end up with areas where no one takes responsibility and it becomes no man's land? A condition for litter picking around the site, especially near takeaway facilities, and an abundance of bins with funding from the developer to pay for the increase in costs to CBC to empty them. A further condition needs to be set regarding any proposed takeaways, that they pay a lump sum to be agreed with Stanley Parish Council to litter pick within the village. This is to mitigate against the increase we will see when rubbish is discarded by drivers who have left the site. I look forward to hearing other members of the committee's views on this.
Okay, Councillor Sykes.
Good evening. I'd like to start with the parish plan, which was adopted by the parish and by Colchester Borough Council in March 2011. And it was over a period of 2.5 years that a number of volunteers worked on this, and we consulted, we surveyed. We done an independent survey for our young people through Stanway School. And I've got the parish plan here, and I can tell you that 59% of residents responded saying they would like more leisurely shopping, and 35% of our residents said they wanted to see more restaurants and eateries in the area. So I think that what's proposed for Stanway fits in with what our residents asked for. When we done the parish plan, we was pushed and encouraged by officers this is the way to go forward, and it would be used as planning guidance. Well, I know in Maine, the developers that have worked in Stanway have used the parish plan. Some of the railway sidings, and I know some persimmons and that, they have looked at our parish plan, but it seems that the planning officers do not, because I had to bring it up with the Wyvern Farm development. Well, as this was adopted in 2011, on page 19, we also reported, also recently, the proposal for Staines Park, intended as a prestigious business park offering jobs, was withdrawn by the would-be developer due to the lack of interest, right? It goes on to say that the consequent lack of employment opportunities resulting from these developments in the local commercial scene could throw considerable doubt over the justification for further housing development in the foreseeable future. Well, the housing development hasn't stopped. We've got about 1,300 houses allocated for Stanway, right? It isn't feasible for all these residents to go into the town centre. We don't have the transport links, right? Well, I then go on to the vision of Stanway, where not parish councillors, ward councillors were invited to attend meetings with the landowners and with officers. And as ward councillors, we was encouraged to put our views across, to say how we see the future of Stanway. And we did. Clearly we did. And we mentioned restaurants. I mean, a conference centre came up. And all these ideas came up. There was other offers on the table. At one time, Marks and Spencer's, which was quickly quashed, right? So at no time did the officers say that our ideas weren't feasible. So we naturally assumed they've took them on board. And yes, they have taken them on board, but they've taken them on board in North Colchester. And I wonder why that is. Is it because the council own all the land in North Colchester, right? Whereas Stanway, the council have no land, and it's down to the landowners. So yes, I do realise that this was zoned for employment, but we've done lots of land swaps in Stanway, small, some bigger, the Sainsbury's. We've done little ones on the Pear Tree. There was the old Focus building. Recently, we changed from usage of a retail to a 24-hour gym. We've had takeaways. So we know there's flexibility here, but it seems with Staines Park, it's a different story. So regarding the town centre and an adverse impact on the town centre, talking to residents, they don't make the trip to the town centre because there's nothing really on offer for them. What's on offer is a load of street furnishing, broken pavements, they're accosted sometimes by beggars, right? The bus stops overflow onto the footways. And yes, we have got the added advantage now of a third pound shop, so, but it hasn't increased our residents wanting to go to town. Right, the refusal of the officers goes against the majority of our residents. Where's localism in this? Surely our residents should have some say in this. That's where they live. We've got at least 1,000 residents coming onto Wyvern Farm. All the other allocated housing in Stanway, they want somewhere. We know from a Thursday to a Sunday night, the eateries in Stanway are packed. They're right up to the Chinese, West Side Centre and everywhere, because Stanway is a family-orientated area, and people want to go out together. That's the lifestyle they want. They don't want to go into town, and town of a lunchtime is students, of an evening it's a drinking culture, and that's not what they want. They choose to go out as families. And I wonder if this application had been proposed for North Colchester, would the officer have recommended approval? And I see this in the Gazette, and I wonder, is that not going to have an impact on the town centre? 12 restaurants, right? So, regarding employment, to our residents, to have local jobs is an advantage, because it fits in with the family scene. It fits in with mums being able to drop their kids off and pick them up. They spend their money locally, they want to work locally, they don't have to travel. So there is an advantage for our residents. And I finally would like to say that I'd like to recommend these two applications for approval, and I would like to ask a condition that the local planning committee look at allocating 2.5 hectares of land in the neighbourhood for commercial use to compensate this. Thank you.
Councillor McLean J.
Thank you. If that's a proposal, I would like to second it, because I sympathise with the council officers regarding these applications. It is not often a councillor goes against the officer's recommendation. The developer has worked hard with officers and councillors to get an acceptable proposal on the table. They have taken into consideration the local needs of residents and the traffic problems. We have been asked in the report to disregard the traffic and drainage issues, but unfortunately this is a problem to the local residents, who have had to put up with the major flooding for over 5 years. So I feel this has to be taken into account, as Highways have stated they have no objection, and I know there is no funding, so anything the developer can offer has got to be good for the residents. The traffic has increased considerably on the London Road since the Western Bypass came into effect, causing congestion. The developer has offered to widen the road, making it easier to get to the A12 or straight on to go into town. Also cycleways, footpaths. This is a most welcome as Highways have stated. London Road used to be the A12, and so it can withstand a considerable amount of new traffic before they even look at other alternatives. This is not what the local residents wish to hear, or the local business community. We have in front of us a well thought out application, albeit not policy compliant, but an application to create jobs where business units do not seem to attract any interest. This would be a sympathetic development to the Wyvern Farm, new housing, make it sustainable. I feel not many residents would like to look out onto other units, offices, or even laboratories, as stated. Over 30 years, this site has been left fallow, as it is now time to get it back into operation with a development fit for this side of Colchester. It will have no effect on the town centre due to the proximity of each site. If the council was concerned, they would not allow the massive development, the green light north of Colchester. There is also another development of housing going on the old Cowdrey site, where there used to be business offices. Obviously, this is not taken up or not needed. So this is another sign where business units have been overtaken by housing. Litchfields did a survey, and they found that North Colchester for business development was the ideal site for employment. Secondly, the Colchester Business Park, then Severals Business Park, and then Staines Park. With the changes in business today and due to the internet, with ordering and delivering, industrial buildings do not have the same requirements. So as I stated, I would like to second this, because I think it is something that the Stanway residents would like. It is sustainable for Stanway. It fits well with the rest of the development in Stanway, and I think if we were to look at the employment, the other side will be very acceptable. And I think if we can do, as Councillor Sykes suggested, a land swap to find other alternative employment in Stanway, it would be a very good idea.
Thank you. I'm next. People keep talking about cycleway access, and yet there's no way of getting a bike across that road. There are no Toucan crossings. I brought this up when we looked at Wyvern Farm. How do people get to these places without using the car? In that respect, I don't think this is sustainable. I don't dislike it. I don't think it'll have a big impact on the town centre, if I'm honest. I think the most likely scenario for people using this will be families. It'll probably be families from places such as Kelvedon, places along the A12, Atash Green, out towards Sudbury perhaps, and Halstead. So it could actually draw business into the borough, and money into the borough is obviously a good thing. However, it is contrary to policy, and this is the bit I can't quite get my head around. I'm not sure that the policy is correct, but it is our policy, and I do believe that we have to support our policy. We spend a lot of time at this committee looking at our policy, and most of the time we follow it. Very, very rarely, and only in very exceptional circumstances, do we overturn our own policy. And the only question, or the only point that I would come up with here is there is not enough there for me personally to go against our policy. Consequently, I will therefore be proposing that we support the officer's decision. I would, however, suggest that if the applicant went to the local plan and got our policy on this area changed, or the land allocation changed, I might not be so, well, certainly we wouldn't be so adversely against it. And I quite like the idea of potentially releasing other land. However, this would have to be done before I could actually overturn this land. We do need good jobs in Colchester. We need higher paying jobs in Colchester. This is one of those sites with the access to the A12 that is absolutely vital. There are certain sites within, I'm thinking mainly of the Knowledge Gateway, over near myself. That's great for research and those sort of things. I wouldn't like to see warehousing there. I wouldn't like to see light industry there, because there's no access really to major road networks. Here we're going straight onto the A12, major trunk road. With the right scheme, it should be an absolute no-brainer, and it should be a good place for businesses to set up, and they'll be better paid businesses than perhaps working in restaurants. And there will also, I would hope, there will be enough jobs to cover the shortfall. Now move on to Councillor Hazel.
Thank you very much, Chair. In regard to the crossings for bikes and pedestrians, I understood that the developer had agreed to provide 2 crossings across that way, but perhaps that can be looked into. I take no pleasure in speaking against council policy. My reasons for doing so today is that yes, we have a local plan, a policy, but within any council policy there must be room for flexibility to deal with changing conditions that allow for differences to take place. The local plan, the policy has already been compromised. You have heard by the approval of Ben & Jerry's, Chiquitos, Costa Coffee, the land swap for Sainsbury's, and also the Cowdray Centre, the Mason site, now reallocated to housing. That, for me, drives a coach and horses through this policy, because it would appear the council chooses when it will decide to dig its heels in and when it won't. And I don't think that's very democratic. The existing office blocks adjacent to this site at Staines Park, I understand, employ 6 people between them. They're huge buildings and they're virtually empty. I would also like to know how many business retail applications for this area does the planning department have? As we have heard, in 20 years and actually longer, this land has been laid waste and prevarication after prevarication has taken place. There are few leisure facilities across the borough in this whole area, from the west right through the east to Ivanhoe. There's actually a dearth of local amenity. We hear that 1,300 houses are due in Stanway. Local people in all those houses will be able to walk to this, in my view, modest development of restaurants and leisure walks and shops, as in Sainsbury. Is it reasonable to expect residents from this whole west to east region to have to travel to the Northern Gateway for their leisure? Think about the carbon dioxide problem that we will be creating, the cars on the streets, etc., etc. I believe the offer of 240 plus jobs now will have a better chance of attracting retail businesses and warehouses to this land of Staines Park. I would have thought warehouses and businesses, seeing an attractive area with some decent restaurants and some decent facilities, will actually think, actually, that looks a pretty good place to come and site our business. I support both these applications. I do not believe either of these applications will impact detrimentally to the town centre. You've already heard comment on the Northern Gateway. I wonder what Colbert has to say about the impact 12-screen cinema or whatever it is and umpteen shops and restaurants will have on the town centre businesses. And these eateries have already closed in the town centre. Nothing to do with the Staines Park development, nothing to do with the Northern Gateway proposals. The town centre has unique problems, and we certainly have to do a lot of work to try and work out how we can make Colchester itself a vibrant destination that people want to visit. But I don't believe this development, this modest proposal at Staines Park, will have any impact detrimentally on it. Total block business zone. It would lose Stanway its heart. And that is something we've heard from the planning officer. The local plan seeks to avoid a centre losing its heart. Well, if this whole area of Staines Park and its surrounds is just business, factories, warehouses, research zones, I would say boring, boring Stanway. I would like to see some vibrancy and some local amenities for local people, and I do support this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got 5 more speakers, but I'm going to bring Mr. Pearce back in first, so he can clear up any questions and points from the first few, and we'll do it in blocks of 4 or 5.
Thank you, Chair. I won't take them in any particular order, but I think I'll start with some of the comments from Councillor Sykes. And I think I need to explore in a little bit more detail the development at North Colchester, the Northern Gateway, because it's one thing waving an extract from the local paper, but it's another being the person responsible for that development and knowing actually what's going on rather than reading it from the front page of a newspaper. And I can assure you that the extant planning permission has all sorts of restrictions in it limiting the amount of leisure use that's permitted. When that permission was granted in 2006, and it's still extant, it was a balanced development which included a large amount of employment uses that are appropriate in an employment zone, typically the development at Fleck Woods, the Easter Group development, and some of the other developments that are in the pipeline. In terms of leisure use, once the David Lloyd Tennis Centre has opened, there is approximately 4,500 square metres of capacity within that consent for additional leisure uses. Beyond that, the permission does not allow additional uses. It is true to say that that permission originally and still includes a significant amount of restaurant floor space, but that is an extant planning permission. What you do not have at Stanway is a similar permission. So I think we do need to be very careful about using North Colchester as some sort of comparison. Just because the council owns most of that land, it doesn't mean to say that it's already ridden roughshod over the planning system, nor will it be permitted to ride roughshod over that planning system going forward. North Colchester represents a balanced community, a mixture of uses and residential development, as we are trying to encourage here in Stanway. The concept of a swap, that if this was approved, we can reallocate another 2.5 hectares somewhere else in Stanway, that I think misses the point that this is strategically important in terms of its proximity to the A12. There is no guarantee that you will find another 2.5 hectares that has the same locational benefit in terms of easy access to the A12. So I'm a little bit concerned that that might be something of a red herring, and the proper place for that to happen is through the local plan process, which you know is already well underway, and later this year your colleagues on the local plan committee will be considering preferred options in terms of the call for sites that's come forward. This site wasn't put forward under the call for sites. It would have been quite appropriate for the landowner to put this site forward for uses other than strategically important land uses. That opportunity was not taken up. I won't dwell on what conditions may be appropriate should permission be granted, because I'm not sure we've got to that point. I think also the question of this land has lain fallow for, it might have been 20 or 25 years. I think I need to remind members that this site only became allocated in 2010, the local plan 2010. Up to that, it was either white land or agricultural land. It is fair to say that we'd had a number of speculative applications for development, which hadn't got to the point of being approved. So I think it is misleading to suggest that this land has sat vacant for 25 years. In terms of your local plan, and when it was allocated in 2010, that's 5 years. We've discussed, it's just so many different comments, I'm just picking out. Yeah, I think Councillor Scott Boutel made an interesting point about what is the future of the town centre, and I think that's something that's currently taking up a lot of our colleagues' time in policy and in terms of the local plan committee. And there is no doubt that the character of the town centre is changing. It's responding to the enormous challenge that has been thrown at it by internet shopping. Also, some of the larger retailers moving out of different sectors. This is not a time, in our view, to introduce a competitor to the town centre to the west of town. And you've heard from Michelle Reynolds, and she obviously is promoting a view on behalf of the independent traders. But the town centre is your most precious, sustainable location. It is a sub-regionally important location. And at a time of flux in the well-being of the town centre, we need to think very carefully about anything that challenges its vitality. I think at that point, I would probably wait and see what comes up next. Thank you.
Anything from Ms Pullen or Ms Sirott to add?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have a number of comments. As Vincent has just explained, this land hasn't had a long history of not being in use, and it was allocated in 2010, which is a recent allocation, and there was interest in the site, a serious interest, in 2008 and 2009. I would also like to make the point that it is the duty of planners and the planning system to plan in a comprehensive and long-term way. We're not in this business for quick wins, so what may seem to be attractive now may not be the best for the long-term sustainability and for the economy of the borough. So even if there isn't a B-use interest at the moment, we don't know what the future holds, and we don't know what, we can see how the economy changes substantially, and it's the responsibility of the planning system to ensure that that land is there and available, ready for businesses to come to the area. In terms of the uses proposed, these are not locationally dependent on this site in the way that B uses are. They don't need to be on the trunk road network. And in terms of the way that we have provided policy comments on applications today and in the past, it's evidence-based. We have a very recent employment land study that makes very clear that it's imperative that we protect the highest quality pieces of land within the borough, and Stane Park is identified as one of the highest quality pieces of land that we have. It's not a case that another piece of land somewhere else would be acceptable, even if we were able to do that. So I would just like to highlight that point, that Stane Park site is identified as a high quality piece of land to serve the long-term economic needs of the borough, and that's of the wider borough, not just the Stanway area. I'll pass over to Sirott now.
Thank you. I think most things have already been covered well. I would just say that the fact that some of the existing restaurants are packed and there's a problem with parking demonstrates that the catchment area is indeed wider than the local Stanway area. A point was made about the town centre having a drinking culture in the evening, and that's partly the reason why restaurants are an important element to the town centre, because it adds to that mix and balance of uses in the evening and encourages a range of people into the town centre. The only other point I think that hasn't been picked up is the fact that the local plan is seen to have already been compromised, and that we only apply it when we fancy. Well, this isn't the case at all. Some of the examples given, for Frankie and Benny's, for example, that was actually allocated in part to help support the existing businesses in the urban district centre and the Tollgate area, and that is allowed by the policy. And recently, I think a restaurant was approved further down London Road at Wyvale, again to support the local businesses in that area. So there's those types of uses have been allowed in accordance with policy.
think Mr Pearce had one more point.
Chair. There's a point made by Councillor Hazel that I just want to reflect back on, and I think, Councillor Hazel, you said the adjacent office development only employs 6 people. Well, I'm not sure that can be true unless we're talking about a different adjacent development, because I've been inside it and I know that there are a lot of people employed in those. I'm encouraged by the fact that the office development to the south of London Road and the west of the bypass is now largely occupied after sitting there empty for a while. That's very encouraging. It's suggesting that the market for the type of uses in an employment zone is beginning to pick up and respond. We do know from our own colleagues in economic development that the 2 business incubation centres in town are largely full and have been for some time, and that there is a growing waiting list for people trying to get into incubation units. So from that, there's definitely an indication that the employment zone type uses market is not dead in Colchester. It may not be as flourishing as we would hope, but there are definite signs that it isn't dead, and it's too early to be countenancing other uses that are likely in the long term to lead to pressure from higher value uses that will in the end force out the type of jobs that you are looking to achieve here. I think I also need to just dwell on the Cowdray Centre, and again I'm not aware of a proposal before us, certainly not tonight and certainly not in the near future, for alternative uses. But when that comes forward, that will be the subject of a detailed report. It may even come before the local plan committee later this year or early next year in terms of call for sites. And once again, we will have to think about and address the issue of strategic importance and access to good trunk road infrastructure. So I'm urging you not to be deflected by consideration of other sites. What you're being asked to consider tonight is this site and the impact on its strategic importance, and it's available in the longer term for the type of uses that your policy are seeking to achieve. Thank you.
Got Mr Cairns, then we're going to go back to the councillors with Councillor Chillingworth, Jarvis, Scott, Lilly and Hayes, and then before Councillor McLean and Councillor Scott Patel have a second bite of the cherry, we'll go back to the officers.
Thank you, Chair. I only really wish to speak very, very briefly, just to amplify on the point made by my colleague Vincent in relation to the current outline application for the Cowdray Centre. That is subject to consideration presently, and we clearly don't want to be seen as prejudging that application, but I would like to point out that that is a mixed-use allocation, so that that policy does actually permit for residential and business uses on that site in total conflict to the strategic employment use allocation which is before you presently. I would just like to reiterate that clearly officers have more than demonstrated that the proposals are in direct conflict with the adopted local plan, and I'd like to re-emphasise that you have a statutory duty to determine planning applications in accordance with the adopted local plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise, and they obviously have to be material planning considerations. With regard to the wider national framework in which you have to consider this application, I would remind members that paragraph 24 of the NPPF, which is referred to at paragraph 22 of the officer's report, actually states that members should apply a sequential test to planning applications for main town centre uses that are not within an existing centre and are not in accordance with an up-to-date local plan, as is the case in these circumstances. The NPPF advises they should require applications for main town centre uses to be located in town centres. The paragraph 27 continues that where an application fails to satisfy the sequential test, as is the case in this application, it should be refused. That is national policy guidance. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Chillingworth.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened with great interest to my colleagues' arguments in support of this application. They're very persuasive, and I can understand why the local residents find this an attractive proposal. I have to agree it's a very attractive proposal in many ways. I think it's well designed. I would question the quantity of car parking for the number of establishments, but I think that's a relatively small matter in comparison with the other points. I think this application is premature. We're in the middle of a local plan consultation, at least a review, shall we say, with all sorts of consultations going on. You're quite correct, as I understand it, that this application wasn't put forward by the developer as a possible site. Why not? This is the opportunity. It seems to me that he's jumped the gun here, in that perhaps if he had made representations to the local plan policy people, they might have considered. In fact, they still might consider it if this debate shows that there perhaps is a need for this sort of development in this place. However, I think it's been made very clear by officers that our legal duty as a planning committee is to follow adopted policy which was only adopted relatively recently and is currently under review. We've been told that the National Planning Policy Framework requires us basically to follow these policies, and yet the short-term issues, the attractiveness of this particular development is being seen by colleagues as the reason to approve it. I believe firmly that we should refuse it on the basis of two very important policies. The procurement of future jobs for this borough. One of the key planning policies that we must have to provide the opportunity for commercial development and have the land available when economic circumstances require it. Planning is a long-term business. That's why we have policies, not short-termism. And for that reason, I would like to go along with the officers and refuse it, and I would like to second the Chairman's proposal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Chair. I don't often go against my colleague here on planning advice. I have some issues that I'd like to sort of expand on. Firstly, Colchester is having to build 900 homes per year. It needs investment, the town needs investment, it needs jobs. Here we've got an application here which I would consider major. We can't just ignore it, we have to take a very serious view on it, and to decline it on the basis that it goes against the local plan is almost like saying the computer says no. If we have a can-do attitude, is there not some way that we can accommodate this? Because frankly, I think the outline there does provide a service to residents which is not available in the town. Apart from the daytime, in the evening, it's such a very family-friendly area. The facilities which are there, given the increase in the housing around Stanway as well, I think it is very attractive and could benefit the local residents immensely. Mr. Pearce said we shouldn't make comparisons with the Northern Gateway. I was at the meeting last night where the approval was given for the development of that site. And among the reasons for it was that it was supportive of the town centre. And yet they had restaurants, they had cafes, a cinema, a hotel, all of which are in the town, and yet they were quite happy to include that within that leisure area. Now, Now, earlier speaker said that people would, she was against it because of the town centre business, that people would drive out there and not use the town centre facilities. Well, surely the same argument could apply here, but in the Northern Gateway, they were using that as a positive, that it was in fact town centre supportive. So I don't think it's unreasonable to make some comparisons, and I think the paper has highlighted various items. So my view is that we do have an exciting, development here. I think it would certainly benefit the borough, not just the town, and should be looked at and looked at in ways that where we can make it happen. There is other employment land around still within that vicinity. The officer made a comment, which I didn't quite fully understand, was that the last serious interest in that area was in 2008. Well, that's some time ago, and I know if we even take the long view, it doesn't, in a day where businesses are growing, the economy is growing, you would have thought interest would have been forthcoming. So again, I come back to the idea that we can't just decline it on the basis that, well, it's the local plan. As serious as that may be, are there ways, are we explored all ways whereby we might accommodate this particular investment and development? Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you. I'd like to highlight the contrasts between the two proposals that have been made in a few short words. I think we're looking at jobs or junk food. We're looking at employment land for business or car parks. We're looking at long-term or short-term. We're looking at popularist-driven planning as opposed to statutory duty and policy. We're proposing to listen to the interests of a small-scale survey of the locals in Stanway over the interests of the whole of Colchester, all of the people of Colchester who've contributed to the local plan. And looking at those comparisons, I'm suggesting and supporting the proposal to reject this application on the grounds of sustainability and statutory duty.
Councillor Lilly.
Thank you, Chair. As others, it's a very nice looking design. In fact, it would look good somewhere else, and this is the wrong place for it, basically. But once you take away the KFC, which is in town, there's plenty of pubs, what are you left with? A couple of restaurants. There's plenty of brand new restaurants in the town centre, more opening up. It's become more vibrant. There's more pubs coming in with live bands on. We should support more of the independent shops, so more independent shops should open. But the most important thing is, we have a local plan and we have the policy. If we go against our policy, it will open this council up to numerous and huge developments all over the borough on sites allocated for other issues. So therefore, we must stick to the policy to protect ourselves in this town. It's well designed, as I said. We had problems before when we looked at the Wyvern Farm site. The complaints from the residents about the traffic down there was bad then. Nobody's going to walk to this place here. We all know that. They will all drive there. The car park isn't big enough to handle all those people in there. The jobs will be minimum wage. I'd love to hear a restaurant comes in, that they will pay the living wage. They will be able to keep their tips, which is the big row. But none of this is good for us. I'm afraid not at this time, and it's in the wrong place. So we must stick to the policy. So I shall be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Hayes.
I think we've heard a great deal about a number of things that are not particularly helpful or material. It seems to me that the Northern Gateway is a side issue because, as Mr. Pearce said, there was a planning permission given in, I think he said 2006, which means that certain consequences flow from that. But here we have a piece of land said to have been fallow for 30 years. I've been a Colcestrian for longer than that, and I remember it as grazing land, which I would not call a waste. But it was only designated for this strategic employment land in 2010. And then we are told there was no interest by 2011. Well, I would say that for a piece of land of this size and importance, a year is not a long time to market land if you are, as a landowner and developer, willing to work with the local council towards the purposes described in the local plan. I would myself have been a lot happier if the applicant had been working with the council with the grain of the local plan and not against it. And I have looked at the January 2015 Colchester Employment Land Needs Assessment final report, which, while obviously envisaging that there may be too much employment land designated, singles out Stane Park as most notably including Stane Park, a 12.2 hectare site which benefits from a gateway location on the northern fringes of the Stanway SEZ, adjoining junction 26 of the A12, and the independent consultants have actually singled out Stane Park as being a particularly important strategic employment location. And as we've been reminded, we're here not to do whatever we feel like, but to apply the policy of the government and of the council, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And there have been lots of considerations that have been raised by colleagues and by the applicant, but it seems to me that they are all of quite small significance compared with the enormous significance of Colchester Borough becoming a thriving economy in the medium and the long term. We have been forced to build thousands of houses, tens of thousands of people who've moved to Colchester. We do not want Colchester to be a dormitory for London, or I don't anyway. And it's my understanding that the officers in the Planning Policy Department are working on their, have devised this plan which has been approved and has been given the go-ahead by the inspector in order to create economic growth in Colchester. And I, for myself, do not consider chain restaurants of this fast food nature, which cater to the consumption end of the economy, as being the kind of economy that is envisaged. I mean, when you're talking about B-class use, land use, research and development, offices, distribution, which is important because it's next to the trunk road. These are to do with the growth of the national economy and the growth of Colchester's economy. And how are all these people who live in Stanway going to pay for all this restaurant food if they haven't got good, well-paid jobs? I really feel that there is no reason to depart from the policy that's in the local plan, and for those reasons I think it should be refused. And then there's the additional reason, which is the importance of the town centre hierarchy. We have an exceptional town centre, of which I'm extremely proud as a Castle Ward councillor. And it is changing. There's more restaurant use. I spent the night walking around the town centre with the Purple Flag self-assessment team recently. It's clear that it's changing. We've got a luxury hotel has just opened. We've got a £30 million investment by Phoenix. And we've got a 3-screen Curzon cinema, I hope, about to start. And we've got the Creative Business Centre. And all of those things, to me, are prior in the hierarchy. And I do think, contrary to the applicant's view, that this would harm the town centre's economy. For that additional reason, I would dismiss. And then there's the third reason, that I think that this would be a car-based business, and I regret the lack of provision for cycles. I don't see all these local people really losing very much if they don't get these fast food restaurants. There are alternatives in the area, and the town centre is not far away. And for all those reasons, I propose to vote against this proposal.
Okay, I'm going to bring Mr Pearce back in. Then I have Councillor McLean for a second go, Councillor Willits, Councillor Hazel and Councillor Scott Patel for a second go.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to pick up on the point made by Councillor Jarvis about the site not coming forward since 2008. And I think we just have to remember the turbulence that the national economy has experienced since 2008 and the start of the bank crisis. I think you probably could draw a direct parallel between 2008 and the years afterwards, and the impact that the town has seen in terms of its economic well-being. We've weathered a lot of the storm compared to some of our counterparts nearby and certainly further afield, but I think we would have to say that some of the reluctance in the market to invest in this site has been a direct consequence of the crash that followed 2008. Hopefully, led by housing growth, the national economy is recovering. And I would have thought at this point in time it would be a serious mistake to allow the loss of this site for strategic employment use just as the national economy appears to be showing signs of significant recovery. I think also the question that I need to put to you, members, is you've heard from my colleagues about the statutory duty that you are under to consider applications in the light of your adopted local plan. And I just want to quickly remind members that a departure from your local plan is only allowed in truly exceptional circumstances. You have to identify such benefits from the development that it means you completely overrule your normal planning policies. And I put it to you, members, that if you look at this proposal in that light, is it truly exceptional that we get another KFC or some of the other uses? And at that point, I'll say no more.
Anything from Ms Pullard or Ms Sarrett?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in terms of the reference to the 2008 and 9 interest in the site, that was just an example, because I think we heard earlier there hadn't been any interest for many years, and that's not our understanding of the situation. I'd like to reiterate the point that employment land is land in general is an incredibly precious resource, and it's the responsibility of the planning system to look after that resource. And employment land in particular is often at threat from change of use to other uses. And if I just, as Councillor Hayes brought up, I would just like to refer you to that extract from our very up-to-date up-to-date employment land study, and make the point also that we're not just suggesting that you make the decision for the plan's sake, and clearly it's important that we do, the decision is made in line with the statutory development plan, but the advice, the planning policy advice that we're giving here is based on up-to-date evidence that is fresh this year, and the employment land study recommends to the Council that it adopts a selective approach to safeguarding undeveloped allocations for future development by retaining those sites with the best intrinsic qualities and greatest prospects of coming forward for employment development in future. And it goes on to say that such an approach could also support a proactive strategy for attracting inward investment to the borough by retaining a portfolio of good quality development opportunities that are most likely to prove attractive to prospective firms. This most notably includes Stane Park, a site which benefits from a gateway location on the northern fringes on the Stanway Strategic Employment Zone, adjoining junction 26 of the A12 and providing scope for the site to create its own identity and profile as a business location. It's clear that the large greenfield and locational attributes of the site make this a prime employment location, and it's well poised to serve future business and economic needs of the borough. And I think because it's such an attractive site, that's why it is under pressure. And I'm highlighting this here just to say that it is incredibly important that Stane Park is protected for employment use because of its hugely beneficial attributes. I'll pass over to
Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chair. I understand where you're all coming from, but I have to say, very few of you live in Stanway. Very few of you put up with the daily routine of what goes on in Stanway. The junction with the A12, it's adequate, it's not good. It's not free-flowing. You try getting off the A12 at the end of the day. You queue along the A12. Unfortunately, lots of accidents happen. You don't work on the London Road, where every week A12 is closed. Congestion comes through. We live in the area. We've got hundreds of houses imposed on us. We take an awful lot in Stanway, actually, of different resources in different ways. We have the Bell House pit. Doesn't create a huge amount of jobs, but we have it. You know, there's lots of industry around in the area. There's lots of retail, etc. This is put forward today. It's something the residents would like. I've been, elected because of the residents. They like this. This is 240 jobs. At the moment, there are no other jobs on offer. We keep being told that it is a great area for sustainable development, for laboratories, whatever. I would love to see some of that evidence come forward for this site. I just find it so hard. We've got cycleways, we've got connectivity to Sainsbury's, to all the other shopping areas. You can walk to this site, you can walk to Sainsbury's from the end of London Road, no problem at all. It has a good network of roads, pathways, everything. Licensing has given consent, yet we've sat through numerous meetings. I would love to have been from the onset that we were actually told it's against policy, we're not even going to negotiate it. Job done. Unless it's something that was actually for this council that we could actually discuss and have on the table as a proposition, fine. But to actually go through all the motions, to waste all the hours, I just think it's very sad that we've all been put through it to come to the conclusion of tonight. Because there is something on offer for the local community. There are jobs. Everybody shakes their heads and thinks only 240 jobs. Well, in my book, 240 jobs is better than none. There is very little employment on that spot. And, you've got Chiquitos, you've got all the other restaurants, you've got Sainsbury's. Sainsbury's, another high employer with electronic machines taken over by a robot. So, how much more are we going to get? With the way everything is going in this world. I just find it very difficult. But anyway, that's just my view on it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McLean. It has now gone to 8:10, and in order that we keep with looking after ourselves, we will have a break and we will meet back here at 20 past, please.